Welcome to the morning meeting, everybody. This could be a colossal day in the presidential race. Sean, Tim, and I will break it down for you. If you're watching on YouTube or here on Two-Way, we welcome you. We urge you to participate. It is going to be a raucous discussion, but as always, we urge you, we insist that you be civil as we discuss these things. We're talking about education and facts and peace, love, and understanding, not a big food fight, but there's some elements today that will lend themselves to food fighting. The vice president's doing a fundraiser in Detroit and then flying to Phoenix. Donald Trump, late add to the schedule, has a 2 p.m. press conference, which we'll talk about. J.D. Vance, no public schedules. Tim Walz, no public schedule. President Biden's doing a few little things. First Lady is. Doug Emhoff's in Paris. So to me, this is tale of two campaigns right now and two narratives. Huge crowds, extremely enthusiastic reception, particularly in Detroit. The Wisconsin event was a little flatter yesterday. The press rapture continues over Harris Walz. More and more people saying what a great pick it was, and a lot of momentum. And then you get, please put up the poll, this new poll from Marquette Law School, national poll showing Harris way up, and in the multi-candidate race, which isn't on this slide, she's up 8. But here you see her up 4 with registered and 6 with likely. And I've had serious Republicans in the last 24 hours tell me the race is over, and some Democrats too, that the dynamic that people had long said, which is Trump can only be Biden, Biden can only be Trump. If either of them got off the ticket, any replacement candidate would win. Now, some people said, well, Harris is an exception because she's tied to the administration and she's not a good candidate. She's been an extraordinary candidate under very controlled circumstances. So that storyline of this race is basically over and Harris is going to win is one. But the other storyline is she hasn't talked to the press yet. The vetting was ridiculously light on all the candidates. So she passed up on Shapiro for reasons that were not good. And that Walz's military background and what he said about it is going to be not just a judgment about him, but a judgment about her and her judgment and her character and his character and her capacity to do this job. And Donald Trump's press conference today, if he comes out and does great, people I think are going to say this race is now back to competitive. And if he's going to press her on not talking to the press her on the Walz thing, press her on the economy and on immigration, who knows if he'll do that? He might come out and say he's going to pardon the convicted J6 felons. Who knows what he'll do? And we'll talk about that in a second. But this press conference is going to be a pivot thing. But I will say on the Walz thing, I apologize to Tim yesterday for understating Walz's capacity to be a strong pick. I'm apologizing to Sean today because I minimized the questions about Walz's military service and what he said about it. We're going to try to get into the facts a little bit, but we're mostly going to stick to the politics because the facts are a little complicated for a show of this length. But I will say, although Politico and a few other dominant media places are trying to whitewash that story, the way they tried to whitewash Biden Inc., the Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC are interested in the facts. And Walz is going to have to speak to the facts. And no one knows whether he's going to do a good job doing that. And eventually the vice president will too. Eventually they'll have to answer the questions. So far, the campaign is engaged, as Tim has, in misdirection and attempts to not address the real issue. So let's start with Sean, who deserves to go first because he was right about this. This is a bigger story than I had thought it would be. We all know, as we discussed before the show started, the fact that it came up in his previous campaign is meaningless. This is a different time, different situation, more questions being asked and more facts that we didn't have before. So Sean, where is that going? Is that something Tom Cotton should pursue, Trump should pursue, Vance should pursue? Go.
I think everybody should pursue it. I mean, meaning that the entire team should stay focused on this today. Because again, it goes to your broader point about her judgment, not so much his. You got to tie it back to her. I will say this, J.D. Vance had a degree of swagger yesterday going to the plane. The kids call it a boss move, or I'm not sure what that means, but it's a boss move.
But that is what they call it.
Yeah. On the press conference today, I'm less concerned about what he says at the top and where the Q&A goes. The press conference may start well, where it ends is going to be critical. Real quickly on the Walz stuff, there's 4 issues that I'll just quickly highlight. The use of the term or the title Command Sergeant Major. There's no question that that was something that he could not use. He reverted back to his Tim shaking his head. That is documented. It's not a question. It's not in dispute. The Army and the National Guard have both done that. If you don't stay in grade long enough, for an officer, it's 3 years. You don't get to keep the title. That's how it works. 2, the phrase that he used over and over again, banning guns like I used in combat. He never saw combat. He admits that he never saw combat. So to use the phrase guns like I used in combat is not something that is going over well with a key demographic, which is older Americans. I think that's going to be a problem. The issue about the deployment with Iraq, I think you're going to see some back and forth on the timing of that. It's not when they deployed, it's when they got their warning order, their warn-o. That's what's going to come into dispute, and whether or not he knew he was going and he did that. That's less an issue of stolen valor and just ducking. I mean, that's not stolen valor. That's not standing up. And when you're the Command Sergeant Major, that's a big deal. That's whether or not you went. And then the last is he used the phrase about serving in Operation Enduring Freedom. Within the military, there is a distinction between being a veteran of like a Vietnam War veteran or a Vietnam era war veteran. The distinction comes to whether or not you actually went forward to the deployment to that area. So he can say that he's an OEF era veteran. That's fair. That's a lot of people did that in support of the war. But that, again, that's probably going to be the least of the 4.
Yeah.
That's
Sean. Yep. So Tim, hold on, Tim, for just a second, because Sean, I want to ask you about the press conference too, just because you're one of the nation's foremost experts on this. I think every Republican, except maybe Donald Trump, would agree what he should say today, no matter what the questions are, what he should focus on. What would you like him to focus on? The fact that she's not talking to the press, the debates, Walz, immigration, inflation, some combination of those. And can they get him? Like, can they sit him in the room in the prep and say, if you say this, you will lead the news right on message. And if you talk about J6, you will lead the news right off message and Republicans will be discouraged. So what would you have him talk about, and can they get him to do it?
So I think that the more, as we've discussed before, the more that he stays issue focused and says, hey, this is the first time that I've addressed you guys since she's become the nominee. Let's talk about who she is and her positions. This is what she said on fracking. This is what she said on immigration. This is it. Here's my record. Here's why I think I make a better, my record is much better. She's nuts. She's liberal. He can use any of those phrases. He needs to stay focused on her issues, her policies. If he gets into debates tangentially, that's fine. I want to debate her. Here are the terms. This is why I debated Biden, but I want to debate her on these terms. If he gets back for a tit for tat on the personal stuff, he's losing. And I think
to
answer your other question, hold on.
Yeah,
I think if they go in and say, Mr. President, here's what we know is a winning issue. Here's what's going to happen if we go off the rails. Can they do that? Yes. Will they do that? I think so. But I think the question is, does he adhere to it? And again, it's not what he says in the beginning. It's, does he take the bait on the Q&A?
Should he talk about her unwilling to talk about the press, shoehorn that in the same way as the debates?
If
to
he,
say, she's not answering.
Yes, but again, no one cares. I don't think the average voter is going, "Oh my God, it's been
I agree.
So I think can he weave it in? Yes. Could he say, you know what, guys, you should ask her, but I know he's not, or I know she's not, rather, because
should he talk about Walz and military service?
I think he could question her pick of him. He's crazy on the issues on immigration. I would leave the military service for people who have served. For what it's worth, the people who bring up Vietnam, with all due respect, there is a difference between the issues that in Vietnam and stolen valor. For those in the military, it's a much different issue. I don't want to speak for every veteran, but I will say.
And I'll just say, Donald Trump didn't serve. There's questions about that. Donald Trump's got a lot of parts on his record. Focusing on Walz's military record is not the exclusion of everything else, but it is new, and it does speak to the vet, and it is something that Republicans are going to drive.
I would just say this, Mark. The last thing I'd say is I would defer. Yes, he's got a lot of questions. He should answer for it, but don't make the attack yourself. Say he needs to answer for these.
Yep. Okay, raise your hand if you want to get in, Tim. So sorry, we've gone 10 minutes. You've not said a word.
Yeah,
please take the floor and speak for as long as you want.
No, so I just will say this has become a thing that has to be addressed. I do think this came up in 2018 and 2022. Is it different because it's on the national stage? Absolutely. The heat is much hotter. However, I think walking through what Sean went through, there's answers to all of these. The problem is there are 3 or 4 things to answer, and so it all kind of gets mixed together, and the press has some interest. First, when this came up previously, the Minnesota National Guard has confirmed that it is wholly appropriate for Walz to say that he served as a command sergeant major. He also have people from his unit who have said that that is appropriate. When he retired, he didn't complete the coursework to keep that title. So yes, he
Or
did.
stay in grade.
He retired at a lower level, but he did achieve that title. So second thing, the timeline on deployment. Um, February 2005, Walz files to run for Congress. May 2005, he retires from the National Guard. July 2005, his unit receives the alert orders for deployment. So that timeline should be dug into because I think that timeline is actually helpful to Walz. And then the last thing I will say is on the combat question, carrying weapons into combat, it is a little bit of like, if you've listened to Tim Walz speak, sometimes it is a little bit of like word mix in how sentences come together, but I think he's an effective communicator. However, here's how I hear, I know we're going down a rabbit hole here, but it's important. Here's how I hear the sentence that's being criticized. We can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried, which he did carry and train with, in war is the only place that those weapons are at. It is a question of where the comma is in that sentence. All of this said, I understand why Republicans are going after this. I do think Democrats putting out someone like Patrick Murphy, who did the rounds on TV yesterday, incredibly credible. Other veterans should speak up. I think it is unfortunate that you have this being attacked for someone who served, for someone who went to school on the GI Bill, passed post 9/11 GI Bill, has done a ton for veterans. I know why it's happening. I know he's getting swift voted. Chris LaCivita loves this. I think if Donald Trump comes out and talks about it at the press conference today, it is one way to step all over it. If Republicans think they have a good thing going, it seems like the wrong strategy.
Tim, should surrogates respond, or does the candidate himself need to do an interview?
It's a good question. I think you have to see where it goes. We are one day after Vance launched this attack. I think surrogates are out there making the case pretty effectively right now, those who are veterans. And then you make the analysis and see if this is something that is going to go away or not.
Yeah. Did you do all that research yourself, or did the campaign or someone else give you that?
I mean, that's me piecing it together and knowing from Minnesota in 2018. But I had to go through, back like 6 years and be like, what was that again? Yeah.
Right. So I've listened to the surrogates and to you, and I don't find you've been actually the most responsive of anyone I've heard. Most everyone else tries to deflect and say things like, we honor his service.
It's a hard, when you get into a timeline, it's tough. Like, but you have to explain.
Sean, what do you think of Tim's various explanations?
First of all, on the command sergeant major, and with all due respect, you're just wrong. You have to serve in grade. He has used the title, comma, ret. That's retired. He's claiming that he retired at that rank. That's not accurate. That is a lie. Okay, and so that's number one. Number two, I think with all due respect, in politics, when you're explaining where the comma is, you're losing. And he was creating the illusion that he used weapons.
I'm refereeing a little bit here.
No, but you're asking me.
Tim can get away with that one. But speak to the question of the deployment. Did what he did, based on what we know what he did, is what he did regarding choosing to run for Congress. Is that a problem? Is that a problem? A meritorious problem?
I will concede to Tim the timeline's going to matter. And why? Because in the military, paperwork doesn't exactly flow easy, right? So the question is, when did you get your warno? But when also did everybody know it? So it's not like no one had a clue that this was coming down the pike. They'll tell you, hey, get ready, start to get your stuff in order. You're going, here's what's happening. We're going to send the warno in 3 months, because we got to release. I mean, it doesn't work as pretty as So
again, seems, from what I've read, this is somewhat a question of military culture. And so that if there was the slightest indication that they were going to go, some people have said he abandoned his team. He abandoned his team. So regardless of the finite details of the chronology, it appears that he abandoned his team. Is that now he did it to run for Congress? He could say, "I thought I could serve them and the whole country and my community better by running for
But
Congress."
you're again,
but was he morally obligated under the kind of culture of the military to only leave if he absolutely had to, whereas he left voluntarily or
he
not?
accepted the rank of command sergeant major, which is the leader, the highest enlisted rank, right? So the idea is you're going off to lead these folks, your company, your battalion, and the idea of saying, "Hey, I'm ready to lead you," and oh, by the way, right when we get the warno or the word of it, I'm going to bail because I want to run for political office, does not go over well. If you didn't want to do it, you shouldn't have accepted the promotion, knowing that there was an additional, not just the title itself,
right? Yeah, but the responsibility. Yeah, leadership responsibility. Tim, what do you think of that?
I mean, again, the timeline that we have is that warning didn't come, that formal warning. I mean, like, was there a war
but
that
they
was
knew there was
happening? Yes,
they knew there was a good chance. They knew there was a good chance they'd have to go, even if the timeline is the most favorable to them. They knew there was a chance they had to go, and he chose a different course.
Yeah, there is the timeline that we have. It's not like he made there was no indication that they were deploying.
That's not true. That's not how it works, Tim. It's not.
Look, Sean, I respect.
Tim, let's just say hypothetically that there was reason to believe they were going to be deployed. Let's just say that, because that's not impossible, and even under the current timeline, that seems like more likely than not. If that's the facts, forget your view of military culture. Is that a politically troubling thing for him to have to answer? And what's the right answer to it?
I think the answer is that he has 24 years of service in the Army National Guard. And then I think that if you bring out someone like Donald Trump to make this attack, I mean,
no, but that's misdirection. That's both of the things with respect. Those are both misdirection.
No, I don't think so.
Is it hard for him to say? Of course, is it hard for him to say on the merits? This, you served honorably for 24 years, but at the critical moment when the men and women you led were going to be deployed, you chose not to go with them. Is that politically difficult to answer? On the merits, not raising Donald Trump and not raising 24 years of service.
Look, is it a tough political answer? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like it is not an easy answer, but I think there are answers. That is the point, is that when you get into the details of this, and this is to your question of like, should there be surrogates out there? Should the campaign have him out there answering this more? We'll see how this further develops, because I think there are legitimate factual answers to these questions. You put these 3-4 things together and you make them a mush, then it's hard to deal with. Yeah.
Hey,
all right. Last question for go ahead.
I was going to say, I just would love to hear how this is playing. So
Yep. So you were going to get people. Tim, one quick question: are you happy or sad Donald Trump's having a press conference?
Happy.
Yeah, I figured that would be your answer. All right, everybody, come on in. If you want to ask about something else, you can, but we'd love you to stay on this. iPhone 182, unmute. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Tell us who you are, where you're calling from, who you're supporting in the campaign, and go for it.
I'm Courtney. I'm from Georgia. I'm supporting Trump. And I just have to say, I'm obsessed with y'all's program. New fan of Tim's, love Sean, love you, Mark, for many, many years. But
thank you very much.
Hope and pray. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Perfectly well. Keep going.
I hope and pray Trump does not speak a lot about this today at a press conference. Please, he did not serve. Let's respect the veterans. Let's respect the military. He did not serve. Please let JD Vance speak about this. I think this is a very sensitive situation. We need to be respectful. And I just do not think it would be a good look to send him out there to, I love him, but I don't want him to go babbling about this. I'm worried about my little grandchild when the Ritalin starts wearing off in the afternoon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know
would you like him? Are you okay with him having a press conference, or are you the inverse of Tim? You'd like him to
I'm a little nervy about the press conference. To be honest, and I love him, but it's like, oh gosh, please don't say anything, horrible. Like,
how are you feeling? How are you feeling about his chances in general, both in Georgia and nationally, now that we're dealing with the Kamala Harris mania?
Well, honestly, I think it's pretty good. I think if you listen to the national media, the mainstream media, I think you get very nervous. But I think I love Richard Barris, the pollster. And I think if you really get down to the weeds in the swing states, I think it's going to be okay. Now, I'm not going to sit back and not go knocking on doors, but I'm feeling pretty good.
Just tell us your name again.
Courtney.
Your name again?
Courtney.
Courtney, how did you find out about the morning meeting?
Oh, Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was a huge fan of the circuits, Mark, a huge fan.
Thank you. All right, Courtney, thank you. All right, Tim, Sean, questions for Courtney?
Courtney, what do you think about this Tim Walz thing? Do you think it's got resonance for people who didn't
Oh
serve?
gosh, I can't hear you. Hold on one second. I'm dying to hear. Hold on. Let me put my little earphones in. Okay. Ask again, Sean.
I was just saying, what do you think about the discussion that we're having? Do you think that this issue is just a bunch of insiders talking, or is it actually?
No, I think it is very important. And I think stolen valor is a very serious issue to those. I've had family members serve in the military, and I think the comma comment, that's a little weak, Tim. And I really, really have grown to love you, Tim, but I think that's a little weak. That's kind of going back to the Bill Clinton days.
There's so much overlap between Minnesota nice and like Southern nice right now. So we're speaking a similar, not the exact same language, but like, I hear you.
Well, I really like you though, Tim. I really do. I really respect you, and I really have grown to like you a lot.
Tim is America's sweetheart, including Republicans.
I'm just a big fan. I'm a big fan. Yeah. We disagree, but I love how y'all are so respectful and you listen to everyone's opinions. I really do.
Thank you, Courtney. Tim, do you have
Yeah, sorry. Excuse me.
No, I apologize, Courtney. Tim, do you have a question for Courtney? We want to get other folks in, but do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you think Trump's going to win?
I do. I hope so. I do. I really do. I say every election, like, oh my gosh, this is the most important election ever. Like things are really going to change, but I feel like this one really, really is. I do. Either way.
Courtney, come back regularly and bring all your Georgia friends, please.
I will. And thank you so much for calling on me, Mark. Have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You too. All right. We got Bruce. Please unmute. Tell us where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Bruce Director. I live in Leesburg, Virginia. I'm supporting Trump. I think the Walz thing is a big deal, but I agree with generally what you've been saying. My question is actually, though, about the economy, because it seems to me that's really still the big issue in this election, not the communications PR idea about what people are saying about that, but the actual physical effect of the economy. For years, we heard the Biden people come out and say, well, the economy's not as bad as people feel, but they give a bunch of statistics. I think we're still in that domain. The stock market is one thing, but the combination of what is a physical economic slowdown and also the inflation, continuing inflation, seems to me that's got to kick in, and the PR comm side of things that seems to be what the main discussion is about has to retreat. I was wondering what people think about that.
Okay, guys, what do you think?
I would just say I agree. I think he's absolutely right. And that's the more that the economy and immigration are still the number one, number two issue, the more that we can focus on things like last week's jobs report, why people are feeling it. I've always said that the economy and safety are gut visceral issues. If you don't feel the economy's good for you or that you feel safe walking down the street, it doesn't matter what a government statistic says, right? You either feel it in your gut, I can walk down my street safely, or I feel that the economy's working for me and my family, or it's not. So this is the sort of the Bush problem that he had, Bush 41. And so anyway, I agree with you. I think that's what people care about the most, especially the people that are going to make the matter in this election.
Yeah. I also, to Sean's point, I just think, obviously it's the issue that people care about the most. It's repeatedly the issue that people care about the most in elections. I also think that Democrats have a very good forward-looking case to make on the economy, and what a Trump economic agenda looks like in a second term. Tax cuts for wealthy people, well-connected, lobbyists getting what they need, not regular people. So I think there's a message to deliver there. People care about the issue, so you have to talk about it.
But Mark's put up that poll many times that people still far and away trust Trump with the economy. And I've heard people on this call. Let me just say I really do appreciate this call. I've only been listening to it for a couple of weeks, but I really think it's great to have this kind of discussion. But even people on this call who support Harris, I've heard them be asked, well, who do you trust to the economy? And they say Trump, even though I'll never vote for him. So
Yeah.
I
Bruce,
think,
thank you, Bruce. I just want to get some other folks in before we go. But
very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for joining. David, go ahead. Tell us where you're from and who you're supporting, and chime in.
Yeah, this is David. I'm calling from Dewey Beach, Delaware, kind of America's summer capital. Today, I'm on the Democratic side for sure. I think we need to think about how important this is to people who would consider voting for a Harris Walz ticket. And my view is for people who would consider voting for that ticket, it's not quite as important as it is to people who are definitely going to vote for Trump. And frankly, it's not as important as it is to the media who's looking for a story to get eyeballs and something new to talk about each day with our 24-hour news cycle. And I also wanted to point out—
David, I'm sorry, let me just clarify if I could. So is there any circumstance under which his war record would matter to undecided voters, do you think? Is there any circumstance?
I think if you had a really bad service record, like you had a discharge that was undesirable, you did something that was like almost criminal level or something like that,
right?
You've got a real
So you
serious
think
issue,
so you think if what we know so far, and again, the vet was not good enough, I think, necessarily. If what we know so far, assume the worst case of what we know so far, that in every instance that Sean detailed, the facts are bad for him. Even then, you think swing voters won't care?
I think most swing voters will not. Well, I wouldn't say may not care, but it won't rise to the level of importance of them not voting for him.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah,
go ahead, David. Finish your Sean, and then David again. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I would just say, I think first of all, I hope please have a devil for me tonight at the rudder, or go to the starboard, whatever you choose. But I brought back memories. Second, I think you're right to the extent that it matters to the people it matters to, and to a lot of folks that have served or that have a family member that have served or that are older. This issue does matter to them. But I think for a lot of people who aren't as connected, it may not. And so I guess, as I said, the people that it matters to, it matters a lot to.
Yeah. But what I would say is, David, it also is going to depend on how he handles it. Does he handle it in a confident, forthright way, or does he reveal a lack of clarity and sincerity about it?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here. I agree with what both you and Sean are saying. The other thing that you guys haven't talked too much about yet is likability. And people like to vote for people that they can relate to and that people they like. And Walz is really good in that department. I mean, he's aces in that department, and that counts for a lot. Frankly, Harris has a little bit of work to do in that department. I'll admit that, even though I'm supporting her, she definitely has work. But when you look at Harris's negatives versus Trump's negatives, ultimately, I think when the polls settle down, I think she'll have less people negative about her than Trump will. So on the likability thing, and which has a major factor in elections, I think they're teed up pretty well.
Tim?
The final thing I want to say just on the Walz military record is Allison Goodspeed in the chat. We're citing the chat here. This is great. Uniform Code of Military Justice. Retired Army personnel can be addressed using their last earned rank with a retired or retiree designation.
Correct.
So
he didn't earn it.
That is a paperwork distinction, not a reflection on the correct retired rank. So I also want to say, just Sean, I don't think I've said during this call, I respect your service. I know you have also served. So I want to make that clear. I meant to say that at the top today.
Thank you. Now I have to add the disclaimer that all views expressed by me are mine and mine alone, and not those of the Department of Defense, the Department of Navy, or any other government institution. Thank you.
David, who do you think is going to win the election?
If they execute well, I think Harris has it. She just has to execute well. Go win.
And what's Trump's biggest advantage?
His biggest advantage, I would say his position on immigration, and potentially the economy could be his biggest advantage.
Okay, David, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we've run a little bit over.
Hey, one real quick thing, Mark.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Sean.
I just throw this out there. I know that we're going to see snippets of it today, but President Biden has taped an interview with Bob Costa of CBS. These are the things that potentially have the ability to inject a story or an issue into the dialogue. We don't know entirely what's been said. There's been one or two snippets. I say that because these are the things, you asking who's up, who's down, and I know we all love to talk about this. But just like this Walz thing threw a wrench into the narrative, every day there's a potential of something like this coming in
Yep.
to do that.
I will say that I sometimes people say, doesn't Biden want Harris to lose? No, every incentive he has is for her to win. This will be the most closely coordinated operation between an incumbent vice president running for president and an incumbent president that we've seen in our lifetime. There aren't that many examples. There's Reagan, Bush, and there's Clinton, Gore. And unless somebody wants to correct me, I think that's it. But this will be deeply coordinated. And so whatever he says in that interview is intended to help her, not hurt her. And the comm staff at the White House is very focused on that. All right. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Sorry we didn't get more in. 2:00 today is the press conference. And we're going to do one of my favorite parts of two-way, which is what we call mystery political science theater. Now, I'm hoping Donald Trump starts close to on time, but you'll get a link to join. 2 p.m. Eastern time, we'll join up. We'll watch the press conference together. I'll do some annotating, commenting in a respectful way, just like Tim would want me to do. And then we'll do a post-game show and we'll talk about how the press conference went. And so you can watch cable news and see it, or you can join the two-way community and have this kind of bipartisan, respectful, sophisticated conversation about how Donald Trump did. And we'll talk about whatever else has happened between now and then. So thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll see you also 2:00 here on two-way. And then again tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean and Tim, America's Sweethearts, back again for another morning meeting. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.